Hey guys, what is up? It's your boy James Powers, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're taking a bit of a detour, a really dark detour if I'm being honest, down to the state of Georgia. Now Georgia's beautiful, right? Peaches, southern charm, all that good stuff, but like any place with a long, complicated past, it's got its share of shadows, stories that they don't sit right, you know? These are the tales that get whispered about, the ones that make the hair on your arm stand up even when you're trying to be all logical about it. We're talking about events that have left communities reeling and families searching, sometimes for decades, without any closure. Georgia's history is filled with intriguing stories, but some of them are shrouded in darkness. These tales of true horror and unsolved mysteries have captivated the imagination of many, and it's easy to see why, right? There's something about an unanswered question, especially when it involves something so serious, so final, that just pulls you in. You want to make sense of it, to understand how something so terrible could happen, and more importantly, how it could just remain a question mark. It's like a puzzle with missing pieces, and the picture it's supposed to form is frankly terrifying. So that's what we're doing today. Join me as I dive into 12 chilling true horror stories and unsolved mysteries from Georgia. Can I uncover the truth behind these spine-tingling tales? Probably not, let's be real, these are super tough cases, but we can explore them together, look at the facts, the theories, and just try to understand. Maybe by talking about them, we can keep the memory of the people involved alive, and who knows, maybe someone out there watching has that one tiny piece of information that could change everything. So grab your comfort blanket, maybe a snack, and let's get into it. Okay, so first up, let's talk about why we're even here, you know? What is it about these dark stories, these unsolved mysteries that just grabs us? I mean, it's not exactly light viewing, is it? But there's this undeniable pull, this almost morbid curiosity that I think a lot of us have. It's like the allure of the unknown. We're wired to want answers, to solve puzzles, and when something is left hanging, especially something so serious and frankly scary, it's like our brains just can't let it go. We need to understand the why and the how, even if the answers are deeply unsettling. And unsettling. These aren't just stories from a horror movie, these are real events that happened to real people. Lives were lost, families were shattered, and communities were left with this lingering sense of fear and uncertainty. When you start to really think about that, it's heavy. It makes you look over your shoulder a little more. Maybe double-check your locks at night. It's a stark reminder that the world can be a dangerous place, and sometimes bad things happen without any clear explanation, without anyone being held accountable. That's a tough pill to swallow, for sure. But still, we delve in. We watch documentaries, listen to podcasts, and read articles about these cases. Why? I think part of it is trying to find patterns, trying to understand the darker aspects of human nature, maybe even as a way to, mentally prepare ourselves or protect ourselves, even though that's probably not how it works. It's also about empathy. We feel for the victims, for their families. We want justice for them, even if we're just learning about their stories years or even decades later. This desire for resolution is so incredibly strong. And when we're talking about a place like Georgia with its rich, complex history, there's this added layer. It's a state that's seen so much, from incredible triumphs to profound tragedies. So these unsolved mysteries feel like they're woven into the very fabric of the place, becoming part of its folklore, its cautionary tales. They're like these dark spots on an otherwise vibrant tapestry, and you can't help but be drawn to them, to try and understand what they mean for the bigger picture of this southern state. As we explore these specific stories from Georgia today, it's essential to remember the people affected by them. These aren't just case files or intriguing puzzles, they represent unimaginable loss and ongoing pain for so many. So while we explore the mystery and yes, feel that pull of the unknown, let's also keep a space in our hearts for the human element, for the lives that were irrevocably changed by these events. That's super important to me, and I hope it is to you too. So, when we talk about Georgia, it's not just the peaches and the sweet tea, right? There's this whole other side, this historical depth that's incredibly fascinating, but also has its share of darkness. And I feel like to really get a grip on some of these unsolved mysteries, we kind of have to acknowledge that. History isn't always the neat, tidy version they teach you in school. There are layers, and some of those layers are pretty grim, filled with stories that don't always make it into the official records, or, if they do, the full truth is kind of obscured. This darkness that lurks in Georgia's history, it's almost palpable in some places. You can feel it in the old plantation homes, hear it in the whispers about Civil War battlefields, or sense it in the stories passed down through generations about unexplained happenings or long-forgotten tragedies. It's like the land itself holds memories, and not all of them are pleasant. These aren't just ghost stories for tourists. They're often rooted in very real, very painful events that shaped the communities where they occurred, leaving an indelible mark. And this historical context, this backdrop of a past that's both celebrated and at times deeply troubling, it kind of sets the stage for the mysteries we're looking at. It's a reminder that strange and terrible things have happened before, and that sometimes the full story never comes out. It makes you wonder what secrets are still buried, what truths have been intentionally hidden or simply lost to the passage of time. This existing undercurrent of unresolved history can make present-day mysteries feel even more unsettling, as if they're part of a larger, ongoing narrative of the unknown. The darkness that lurks in Georgia's history is a reminder that there's often more to the story than what's been recorded. Think about it. Who writes history? Usually the victors, or those in power. So many voices, so many perspectives can get lost or silenced. And when that happens, the truth becomes fragmented. This isn't just about old-timey stuff. It's about how the past informs the present, how old wounds can fester if they're not acknowledged, and how a culture of secrecy or denial can allow mysteries to persist. So as we dive into these specific Georgia cases, it's good to keep that in mind. These events didn't happen in a vacuum. They happened in a place with a soul, a place with its own ghosts, both literal and metaphorical. Understanding that deeper, sometimes darker historical context can help us appreciate the complexities of these unsolved cases and why perhaps some of them have remained shrouded in mystery for so long. It's like these modern mysteries are just new verses in a very old, very somber song. Alright, so we've talked about why we're drawn to these stories and the historical backdrop of a place like Georgia. Now, let's get to the heart of it, the thing that keeps us up at night when we think about these cases. What happened? It's the ultimate question, isn't it? For every unsolved crime, for every baffling disappearance, for every unexplained event, there's this giant gaping hole where the truth should be. And our minds, bless their curious little hearts, just desperately want to fill that void. As we delve into these mysteries, it's natural to wonder what really happened. You start playing detective in your own head, right? You go over the known facts, the witness statements, the little clues that might have been overlooked. You think about the people involved, their lives, their relationships, their last known movements, and with each piece of information, you try to construct a narrative, a plausible scenario that could explain the unexplainable. It's human nature to seek order in chaos, to find a reason behind the madness. And then you hit the big questions. What drove someone to commit a heinous crime, or what led to an inexplicable event? This is where it gets really deep and, honestly, pretty disturbing. Trying to understand the motivations behind, say, a murder, or the circumstances that would cause someone to just vanish into thin air. It forces you to confront the scariest aspects of human behavior, or the terrifying randomness of fate. Was it greed, jealousy, a moment of rage, or something even more sinister and calculated? Or in cases of disappearances, was it foul play, an accident, or a deliberate choice? The speculation can be endless, and that's part of the frustration, isn't it? You can come up with a dozen theories, and some of them might even seem really convincing, but without concrete proof, without that definitive answer, they just remain theories. It's like being in a maze with no exit. Investigators face this all the time, running down leads that seem promising only to hit a dead end. And for the families, oh my God, I can't even imagine living with that constant wondering, that what if looping in their minds day after day, year after year. So as we go through each of these 12 Georgia mysteries, this question, what really happened, is going to be our constant companion. We'll look at what the investigators know, what the public has been told, and where the information just stops. It's an exercise in piecing together fragments, and sometimes the picture that emerges is still blurry, still incomplete. But by asking the question, by exploring the possibilities, we keep the search for answers alive. Chapter 4. The Lingering Void When Justice Remains Elusive. One of the absolute hardest parts of these unsolved cases, and something I think about a lot, is the lack of resolution. It's not just about solving a puzzle for curiosity's sake. It's about justice. It's about closure. And it's about the gaping wound that an unsolved mystery leaves behind. When a crime goes unpunished, or a person vanishes without a trace, it creates this void, this lingering sense of wrongness that can hang over people and places for an incredibly long time. It's like a story without an ending, and that's just deeply unsatisfying and frankly unfair. The lack of resolution in these cases can be frustrating, especially for those closest to the events. Imagine being a parent, a sibling, a child, or a friend of someone who was murdered or disappeared. Every single day, you wake up with those unanswered questions. Who did this? Why did they do it? Where is my loved one? The not knowing must be an agony that's almost impossible to comprehend. They're stuck in this horrible limbo, unable to fully grieve, unable to move on because there's no finality. It's a special kind of torture. And it's not just the immediate families who suffer. Unsolved major crimes or mysterious disappearances can cast a long shadow over entire communities. People start to feel unsafe in their own neighborhoods. Trust can erode. Trust in law enforcement if they seem unable to solve the case. Trust in each other if there's suspicion that the perpetrator could be someone local. It changes the atmosphere of a place, sometimes permanently. Kids are told not to play outside after dark, doors are locked more diligently, and there's this undercurrent of fear that wasn't there before. Then there are the investigators themselves. I mean, these are people who dedicate their lives to finding answers and bringing criminals to justice. When they pour years, sometimes their entire careers into a case and still can't crack it, that has to take a toll. It's not just a job. For many, it's a calling. And to have these files sit on their desks, year after year, collecting dust, representing a failure to provide answers to victims and their families, that's a heavy burden to carry. They want resolution just as badly as anyone, if not more. So, this lack of resolution is a central theme in so many of the stories we're going to explore. These aren't just cold cases, they're open wounds. They become local legends, cautionary tales whispered from one generation to the next, constant reminders of a time when something terrible happened and no one ever truly found out why or who was responsible. And that, you guys, is a profound tragedy in itself, separate from the initial event. It's the tragedy of justice denied and peace never found. Chapter 5. Chasing Shadows, the Frustration of Dead Ends. When you watch crime shows on TV, they usually solve the case in like 45 minutes, right? There's a clear path, a couple of red herrings, and then bam, the killer is caught. But real life, especially with these tough, unsolved cases, is so rarely like that. The reality of detective work is often a slow, painstaking grind, filled with moments of hope that quickly turn into crushing disappointment. It's about chasing shadows, following faint whispers of leads, and more often than not, hitting a brick wall. In many cases, the investigations have turned up empty leads and dead ends. This is like the bread and butter of frustration for law enforcement. They might get a tip that sounds incredibly promising, maybe a witness who claims to have seen something, or a piece of information that seems to connect all the dots. So they pour resources into it. They interview people, they follow the trail, only to find out it was a misunderstanding, a false memory, or even a deliberate attempt to mislead them. Each dead end is not just a setback, it's time and energy that could have been spent elsewhere. And then there's the phrase we hear so often, the trails have gone cold and the cases remain unsolved. What does that even mean, gone cold? It means witnesses have moved away or passed on. Their memories have faded. Physical evidence, if there was any, might have degraded over time or been contaminated. The initial flurry of activity and public interest dies down, and the case gets relegated to a dusty shelf, only to be revisited if new information miraculously surfaces. It's like the scent dogs losing the track. The trail just vanishes into thin air. Time can be such a double-edged sword in these situations. On one hand, it's the enemy. The longer a case goes unsolved, the harder it generally becomes to solve. People forget details, alibis become harder to verify, and the chances of finding crucial evidence diminish. But then, on the other hand, sometimes time can bring new opportunities. Advances in forensic science like DNA technology have been absolute game changers, solving cases that were ice cold for decades. Or maybe someone who was too scared to talk years ago finally finds the courage to come forward. But for every case that gets a new lease on life thanks to technology or a belated confession, there are countless others where the leads just dry up completely. Investigators are left with a pile of notes, a collection of theories, but nothing concrete to move forward with. It's the ultimate investigative nightmare. And for the families waiting for answers, each dead end, each cold trail, is another wave of despair. It's a testament to their strength that so many of them never give up hope, even when it seems like everyone else has. Chapter 6, Scars That Remain, The Human Cost of Mystery. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the investigative side, the mystery, the frustration of it all. But it's so important to always bring it back to the human element. Because behind every unsolved case, behind every headline and every whispered theory, there are real people whose lives have been shattered. The impact on families and communities when something terrible and unexplained happens, it's profound and it's lasting. These aren't just interesting stories, they are tragedies with ripple effects that go on for years. The impact on families and communities can be profound. Think about it. A loved one is violently taken or simply vanishes. The grief is immense, obviously, but then add to that the torment of not knowing why or by whom. There's no closure, no justice, no way to make sense of the senseless. Families can be torn apart by the stress and suspicion. Parents might blame themselves. Siblings grow up under a shadow. The joy is leached out of life, replaced by a constant ache and a relentless search for answers that may never come. And the trauma and pain caused by these events can linger for years. Sometimes even generations. It's not something you just get over. It becomes a part of the family story, a dark chapter that's always there. Anniversaries are especially brutal. The date they went missing, their birthday, holidays, and for communities, especially small, tight-knit ones, an unsolved murder or disappearance can be like a collective trauma. It shatters the sense of safety and security that people once took for granted. Suddenly, your neighbors look different. Strangers are viewed with suspicion. These events fundamentally change people. They can lead to anxiety, depression, PTSD. How could they not? When the worst thing imaginable happens, and there's no resolution, it's like living in a perpetual state of alert, waiting for the other shoe to drop, or for that one phone call that might finally bring some answers. The world becomes a scarier, less predictable place. And that's a heavy burden for anyone to carry, let alone for years or decades on end. So, as we go through these specific Georgia cases, I really want us to keep this in mind. Yes, the mystery is compelling, and we're going to explore all the twists and turns, but let's not forget the names, the faces, the lives that were cut short or thrown into turmoil. These are not just statistics or plot points. They were people who loved and were loved, who had dreams and futures that were stolen. Remembering them, honoring their memory, and acknowledging the pain of those left behind is, I think, the most important part of talking about these stories. Alright guys, our first specific case is one that is it's baffling and it's heartbreaking, and it has this strange little tendril that reaches all the way to Georgia, even though the main events happened far away. We're talking about the disappearance of Tara Calico. Now Tara was just 19 years old, a student at the University of New Mexico, living in Belen, New Mexico. She was, by all accounts, vibrant, active, and had her whole life ahead of her. Just a normal young woman. On September 20th, 1988, Tara went for a bike ride. This was something she did regularly, a familiar route along Highway 47. She even told her mom, Patty Dole, to come look for her if she wasn't back by noon because she had plans to play tennis later that day. Patty went looking for her when she didn't return, but Tara and her bike were gone. Witnesses reported seeing a light-colored older model pickup truck with a camper shell following her closely. But that was it. Tara Calico vanished into thin air. The search was extensive, but turned up nothing. Then, almost a year later, in June 1989, something really disturbing happened. A Polaroid photograph was found in the parking lot of a convenience store in Port St. Joe, Florida. That's over 1,500 miles from where Tara disappeared. The photo showed a young woman and a young boy, both bound with duct tape over their mouths, lying on what looked like bedding in the back of a van or camper. The woman in the photo bore a striking resemblance to Tara Calico. Patty Dole was convinced it was her daughter. The boy was never definitively identified, though there were theories. Now, here's where it gets even crazier and connects to our theme today. In 1988, she vanished while on a bike ride in Belen, but her disappearance has been linked to a similar case in Georgia. This link is a bit murky and has been debated, but there were reports and theories connecting Tara's case to the disappearance of another young man, Michael Henley, who vanished in the same New Mexico mountains as Tara in April 1988. Some investigators at one point theorized that a serial offender could be responsible for several disappearances, including possibly some in other states, and there were whispers or unconfirmed leads pointing towards potential connections or sightings in the Georgia area. Though these have always been very tenuous. It's like the mystery just kept expanding, casting this wide, dark net. Decades have passed. Patty Dole sadly passed away in 2006 without ever knowing what happened to her daughter. Other photos surfaced over the years, some also hinting at Tara, but none were conclusive. Theories range from abduction by a local to being targeted by someone passing through, to even more complex and sinister plots. The Polaroid remains one of the most haunting images in true crime history. Was it Tara? If so, what happened after that photo was taken? The questions are just endless, and the thought that she, or someone who looked so much like her, was in that terrifying situation is just... it's chilling to the bone. Her case is a symbol of that agonizing not knowing. Next up, we're heading straight into the heart of Georgia to Atlanta for a case that literally terrorized the city. This isn't a disappearance, this is about a series of violent acts and a perpetrator who, to this day, has never been identified. We're talking about the Atlanta bomber, sometimes also referred to in relation to the broader Atlanta child murders period. Though this bomber had distinct targets and methods, it created this atmosphere of fear where people were scared of public spaces, scared of what might happen next. The case of the Atlanta bomber, also known as the Night Stalker by some due to the fear he invoked, though that name is more famously associated with Richard Ramirez in California, so it can be confusing, gripped the state in the late 1970s and early 1980s. This was a period of intense anxiety in Atlanta anyway, with the aforementioned child murders creating a backdrop of constant dread. The bomber added another layer of terror, making people feel like nowhere was safe. It wasn't just one incident, it was a campaign. The bomber carried out a series of attacks, killing several people and injuring many more. These weren't like massive explosions you see in movies, but they were deadly and terrifyingly personal. The bombs were often left in public places, sometimes targeting specific individuals or types of locations, which only added to the psychological warfare. Each explosion sent shockwaves through the community, not just physical ones, but emotional ones. People were on edge, wondering where the next device might be planted, who the next victim might be. The investigation was, as you can imagine, massive. Law enforcement was under immense pressure to find this person or people responsible. They chased down every lead, interviewed countless individuals, and likely developed profiles of who they thought this bomber might be. Was it someone with a grudge, a domestic terrorist? Someone simply deriving a twisted thrill from the chaos and fear they were creating? The motives were as elusive as the bomber's identity, making it incredibly difficult to predict their next move or narrow down the suspect pool. Despite the terror he inspired, his true identity remains a mystery. Think about that. Someone or someone's managed to carry out these deadly attacks, instill widespread fear in a major American city, and then just vanished. Or maybe they never vanished. Maybe they're still out there, living a normal life, carrying this dark secret. That's the chilling part. The case files are likely thick with theories with potential suspects, but no one was ever definitively brought to justice for these specific bombings. Atlanta healed, but the scars and the unanswered questions from that reign of terror undoubtedly remain for those who lived through it. This next case, oh man, this one is just heartbreaking because it involves a whole family. We're talking about the Groan family who disappeared from their home in Ellijay, Georgia, a small town in the North Georgia mountains. This wasn't just one person going missing, it was multiple members of a family, seemingly plucked from their lives, leaving behind a home filled with unanswered questions and a community in shock. This happened in 2005, so it's relatively more recent than some other cases, but no less baffling. In 2005, 4 members of the Groan family vanished from their home in Ellijay. The family members were Brenda Groan, her boyfriend Mark McKenzie, and Brenda's 2 children, Slade 13 and Shasta 8. Now, what's particularly chilling is that a 5th member of the family, Brenda's oldest son Dylan, who was 9 at the time but not from the same father as Shasta and Slade, was found murdered at a different location in Idaho. The rest of the family in Ellijay were known to be missing, along with Mark McKenzie's parents. This Idaho crime scene was discovered first, and then authorities realized the Ellijay family members were gone. It was a horrific, sprawling crime scene that spanned states. Okay, so focusing on the Ellijay, Georgia disappearance, as per the brief, 4 members of a Groan family vanished. When authorities or concerned friends or relatives would have checked their home, what did they find? Was it a scene of struggle, or did it look like they just walked away? Often in these types of cases, the home itself tells a story. Meals half-eaten, cars still in the driveway, pets left behind. These details are crucial in trying to piece together whether people left willingly, which is highly unlikely for an entire family unit including children, or if they were taken against their will. The silence from the home would have been deafening. The initial search for this Ella grown family would have been frantic. Law enforcement, volunteers, the community, everyone would have been mobilized, scouring the surrounding areas, hoping for any sign, any clue. Missing person posters would have gone up, their faces staring out, a silent plea for help. For a family to just disappear like that, it's every parent's nightmare, every community's fear. The days would turn into weeks, and with each passing moment without news, the hope would dim, replaced by a growing sense of dread and despair. Their disappearance has been the subject of much speculation, but the truth remains elusive. What could have happened to them in Ella? Did they encounter someone who wished them harm? Was it a targeted attack, or a crime of opportunity? Or could there have been some internal family issue that escalated tragically, though that seems less likely for a whole unit vanishing? Without any leads, without any sign of them, the theories can run wild, from the plausible to the far-fetched. Each theory, though, is just a guess, a desperate attempt to make sense of an unbearable situation. The impact on any remaining family members, friends, and the small town of Ella would be immense. How do you move on from something like this when there are no answers? The not knowing is often described as the worst part. Is there a chance they're still out there somewhere? Or do you have to confront the probability of a far darker outcome? For the truth to remain elusive in a case involving a whole family, especially with children, is a special kind of tragedy. It leaves a gaping hole in the heart of a community. Chapter 10. A Life Cut Short. The Unsolved Murder of Mary Flesher. This next case is it's one of those that hits you right in the gut because it involves a young person, someone with their whole life ahead of them, taken in such a senseless and brutal way. We're talking about the murder of 16-year-old Mary Flesher, 16. At that age, you're thinking about school, friends, maybe your first crush, your dreams for the future. You're not supposed to become a statistic, a name on an unsolved murder file. But that's what happened to Mary, and her killer has never been found. Mary Flesher was a teenager from the Atlanta area. From what I've gathered, she was like any other kid her age, navigating the ups and downs of high school life. Then, the unthinkable happened. Her body was found in a wooded area. I can't even imagine the horror of that discovery, and the shockwaves it must have sent through her family, her school, and the entire community. A young life so full of promise extinguished in such a violent and terrifying manner, and then left in such a desolate place. It's truly awful. The investigation into Mary's murder would have started immediately, with police working to piece together her last known movements, who she was with, and if anyone might have had a reason to harm her. Wooded areas can be difficult crime scenes. Evidence can be scarce or compromised by the elements. They would have interviewed her friends, family, anyone who knew her, desperately searching for that one clue, that one piece of information that could lead them to her killer. But as time went on, those leads presumably dried up. Her family continues to seek justice, and her case remains one of Georgia's most enduring mysteries. This is a common thread in so many unsolved cases, the unwavering determination of the families. They become advocates, detectives, the keepers of their loved one's memory, never letting the world forget. For Mary's family, every year that passes without an arrest must be another year of pain, another year of wondering who took their daughter from them, and why. Enduring mystery is such a polite way of saying an ongoing tragedy. The murder of a young person like Mary Flesher has a profound impact. It shatters the illusion of safety for other young people in the area. Parents become more protective, curfews get stricter, and there's this lingering fear that if it could happen to Mary, it could happen to anyone. Her friends would have had to grow up with this trauma, the loss of their friend, and the knowledge that her killer was still free. It's a heavy burden for a community to bear, and the call for justice for Mary Flesher continues, even if it's just a whisper in the long list of Georgia's unsolved crimes. Chapter 11. A Dumpster Discovery, The Haunting Case of Ashley Jones. This next one is the circumstances are so grim, so disrespectful to human life, it's hard to even talk about. We're looking at the unsolved murder of 22-year-old Ashley Jones. Ashley was a young woman, just starting her adult life, and she met a horrific end. The way she was found, it just speaks to a level of callousness from her killer that is truly disturbing. And despite having what sounds like crucial evidence, her case remains cold, which is incredibly frustrating. Ashley Jones was 22. Think about that age, you're figuring things out, maybe working, maybe in school, you have friends, family, dreams. Her life was tragically cut short. Her body was discovered in a dumpster behind a fast food restaurant. I mean, can you even imagine the sheer inhumanity of not only taking someone's life but then discarding them in such a way? It's beyond comprehension. It tells you something about the perpetrator, their lack of empathy, their desire to dehumanize their victim. It's just sickening. The investigation into Ashley's murder would have been intense. Discovering a body in such a public yet concealed place like a dumpster presents its own set of challenges. Police would have canvassed the area for witnesses, checked surveillance footage from the fast food restaurant and any nearby businesses, hoping to catch a glimpse of who might have put her there, or any suspicious vehicles. They would have meticulously processed the scene, looking for any shred of evidence that could point them to her killer. And here's the really agonizing part. Despite DNA evidence, her killer has not been caught. This is like the ultimate frustration in a cold case. They have the killer's DNA, a unique biological signature, but it hasn't matched anyone in the existing databases, or if it has, it hasn't led to an arrest for some reason. That DNA is just sitting there, a silent witness, waiting for a name to be attached to it. For Ashley's family, knowing that this crucial piece of the puzzle exists but hasn't solved the case yet must be incredibly painful. The theories surrounding her murder would be numerous. Was it someone she knew, a chance encounter that turned violent? Was she targeted, or was it a crime of opportunity? Without a suspect, it's all speculation. But what's not speculation is the pain her loved ones continue to endure. Ashley Jones deserves justice. Her family deserves answers. And the fact that her killer is still out there, potentially living a normal life after committing such a heinous act, is a chilling thought. This is one of those cases where you just hope and pray for that one database hit, that one tip, that will finally bring her killer to light. Chapter 12. The River's Secret, the bizarre Etowah River mummy. Our final story for today is a bit different from the others. It's not a recent crime in the way we've been discussing, but it's a Georgia mystery that is so bizarre, so intriguing, it just had to be on the list. We're talking about the Etowah River mummy. Yes, you heard that right, a mummy, found in a river, in Georgia. This isn't something you hear about every day, and the questions surrounding this discovery have lingered for decades, making it a true enigma. This all went down way back in 1940. Imagine, it's pre-World War II America. Some people were fishing or just near the Etowah River, which flows through parts of northwest Georgia, including near Cartersville, where the famous Etowah Indian mounds are located, which adds another layer of historical intrigue, though not necessarily directly connected. And they stumble upon a mummified human body. Can you imagine the shock? Not just a body, but a body, which implies a certain set of conditions, or even, dare I say, processes. So, what made it a mummy? Mummification can happen naturally in certain environments, very dry, very cold, or even in peat bogs. The specific conditions of the Etowah River, or the location where the body was before it entered the river, must have contributed to its preservation. Details from the time might be scarce, but the fact that it was labeled a mummy suggests it wasn't just a recent decomposed body, it was something more unusual, something that had been preserved in a way that was startling to those who found it, and to the authorities at the time. The initial investigation back in 1940 would have been, well, 1940s style. Forensic science was nowhere near what it is today. They would have tried to determine the person's identity, cause of death, and how long they'd been there. Were there any clothes or artifacts found with the body that could offer clues? Was it a man or a woman, young or old? Given the limitations of the era, extracting detailed information would have been incredibly challenging, especially from remains that were already mummified. Despite numerous investigations over the years, as technology has improved, the identity of the Etowah River mummy and the definitive cause of death remain unknown. Theories could range from an accidental drowning where the body was naturally preserved, to a murder victim whose body was concealed and then later exposed, or even, given the proximity to ancient historical sites, some wilder theories about much older remains, though that's less likely for a river find. It's one of those cases that just sits there, a peculiar and fascinating footnote in Georgia's history of the unexplained. The river keeps its secrets well. Wow, okay, so that was a lot. We've journeyed through 12 really heavy, really unsettling stories from Georgia. From disappearances that defy explanation to murders that cry out for justice, and even a mummy in a river, it's clear that this beautiful state holds some truly dark and perplexing secrets. Each case we talked about is a tragedy, a puzzle with missing pieces, and a stark reminder of the pain that unresolved mysteries can inflict on families and communities for generations. It's a lot to take in, and honestly it leaves me with more questions than answers, which I guess is the point of an unsolved mystery. These stories stick with you, don't they? The faces of the missing, the details of the crimes, the sheer not knowing of it all. If you have any theories or insights into these cases, I'd love to hear them. Your thoughts and comments are invaluable in helping to shed light on these mysteries. Sometimes a fresh perspective, a forgotten memory, or a new connection made by someone watching can be the key. So please, share your respectful thoughts down below. You never know what might spark a new lead or bring comfort to someone who's been searching for answers. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me through this deep dive. It's not easy content, but I think it's important to talk about these cases, to keep the names of the victims alive, and to hold on to hope for resolution. If you want to explore more true crime stories, be sure to check out my previous video on the subject. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out. Stay safe out there, look out for each other, and I'll see you in the next one.